There it is.
We're going. It's June 28th, 2023. Brad
It,
Staley.
it is that, sir. No introduction, no theme music. I mean, we've come a long
Nope.
way. We started out with like Metallica theme music, and then now we're just nothing. We just it is what it is. Sorry, guys. Sorry about your bad luck.
Did you want an intro?
No, it's okay. I'll be all
Would you
right.
prefer an intro? Because you can
This
do it if
meeting
you want.
this meeting has been recorded. Is this that disclaimer I've got to sign so that I can't sue you
Yeah.
for holding me against my will?
Well, today we're
uh,
going to talk to Martin. That ought to be interesting.
Martin Vila, arguably one of the hottest anglers on earth.
Hot like
He catches them.
hot like he's a good looking dude, or
I
hot
I
like
I honestly I seen some of the footage from Potomac, and that's the first time I've ever seen a picture of Martin Vila.
he's
So
on
yeah,
camera
man.
almost every tournament.
I don't watch a
Yeah,
lot
I
of it.
know.
So but watch some
He's
of the
my
BPT stuff today.
I did too. I watched a little bit of it.
Yeah.
They're
Looks
catching pretty good.
they are, man. I'm ready to get up there for sure.
I'm gonna miss smallmouth fishing this year, I think, completely. I'm gonna try and get to St. Lawrence, but that sucks.
I'm gonna go to Watauga in East Tennessee this weekend.
This
And
weekend?
yeah, I'm gonna go up there and piddle around. It's about 2.5 hours. I got a place to stay, but I've been by it a lot for work because that's my territory up there. And supposedly it's got really good smallmouth fishing, so I want to go up there and play with live scope and stuff. It's they catch lake trout in that place, man. I saw some pictures online catching lake trout.
I heard about that lake. Is that where they use those big glad baits?
I don't know about all that action.
I think if you look on YouTube, that lake, there's a couple guys that fish Western North Carolina that's all they do is they throw those gigantic swim baits and glad baits
I know they
and
do that
catch
at
jumbos.
the Deep Lake Fontana in North Carolina.
Yeah, it
Fontana is
wasn't
supposed
Fontana. I could have thought it was Watauga.
it could be, yeah. I mean, it looks like it's got some good fish in it. There's not a lot of tournaments. It's about 6,000 acres, so it's a little small lake. And but looks like supposedly everybody I've talked to up there said it's the best lake in East Tennessee for smallmouth fishing. So I'm gonna go and dabble with that a little bit this weekend. And it's gonna be 96 here, and it's gonna be like 84 up there. So
It's gonna be 96 here.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
No warning, no nothing. It's just, hey,
No, just
we're in
there it is.
summer.
That's what happens. It's July 4th. It's time for it to be warm. It's been cool most of the year. So
What's going on in your world?
not much. Got my tail kicked at High Rock, typical summertime High Rock fishing. So we're gonna take all that stinking bass fishing, largemouth fishing stuff out of the boat and put some smallmouth fishing stuff in there and see what happens.
You going with somebody?
Nope, I am not. You can come on up there if you want to.
Just going. I'll be in Florida. I'm leaving tomorrow.
Yeah, no, I'm just going up there to piddle with that. I got one of my customers at work. He likes to fish. I think he'll probably come fish with me one day. Him and I fished Holston back in, it was the day before I left to go to Texas. So it was sometime in April, and it was pretty fun. Holston had a lot of smallmouth in it. We caught several on a wacky rig. This
Contain
weekend
big
is just
ones.
no, like 3.5. I've heard that it's got
It's
some
a good
fives and
one.
six. Yeah, yeah, no, it was fun. I've heard it's got like some fives and sixes in it. Well, Tago supposedly got a bunch of 3 to 4 pounders in it, so we'll see how it goes.
Be interesting to see. James is it's got some good ones in it.
Yeah, yeah, my buddy that lives at James and fishes all the night tournaments, he's the one that told me about Watauga. He said he thought Watauga was twice the lake that James is. He said James is just not fishing that good anymore. And supposedly with the spots, and we talked to the biologist about that, the spots have got in James and they're crossbreeding with a smallmouth, and there's no purebred smallmouth up there anymore.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Um,
what the biologist told me.
yeah, so
Heard the same thing.
yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah.
what's it called? What's that lake up in Virginia that I fish in the
Philpott.
wintertime? Yeah, Philpott's got some good ones, and I think I caught one 4.7 last year.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think that's the biggest one I've caught out of there, but I've seen a few high fours. I don't think I've seen any 5 or 6s, but I believe they live in there.
Yeah, I just want to catch some, try to get some, just try to get some confidence with trying to live scope them. Like watching the BPT guys, I mean, it looked like they're not making a cast unless they see something to throw at.
Yeah,
Looked like what I saw, they're just scanning flats, like
yeah,
flats that had isolated grass on it.
yeah,
And I mean, they're not even making a cast unless they see something to pitch their
yeah.
cricket at. So
They're doing kind of like the Champlain thing, scattered grass. See them on live scope, throw it over there, and watch them come darting across the screen for it. It's pretty amazing. So what else is going on? You're having a good year on
yeah,
the
it
National
has
Professional Fishing Tour.
yeah, league. We're the league. We
League?
do league. We're the league. We do league things. Yeah, no,
NPFL?
it's been a good year, for sure. I kind of think about try to figure out why it's been a good year, and there's really no rhyme or
Me
reason.
too.
I mean, just you just try to like look, what am I doing differently or whatever? And I'm not doing anything differently. I'm fishing the same. The biggest difference is the decisions I make are working out. Not it's not like it's the decisions I would always make, same stuff that I would always do, but a lot of times it doesn't work. And for whatever reason, this year, everything's just like coming together. You know, you go do something, you catch a 6 pounder, you like, I need to go do this for a little while. You catch a 4 pounder, you're like, oh, okay, I'm the man. You know, I got this figured out, and it could change at any moment. So just try to ride it as long as I can.
Well, you're doing a mighty fine job. I'm making sure we're recording. Do you see anywhere? Oh
I
yeah,
do.
I see
Up
it
at the
now.
top, it says
Okay.
recording. Yeah.
Cool. I don't want to have the same problem that we had when we had Seth Michael on.
Yeah, yeah, but no, Texas was a lot of fun. I caught them on a wacky rig down there. The majority of them, I caught a couple of fish the first day, doing some different things. It was just the first day was like the greatest probably tournament day I've ever had in my life. uh, I started out and I kind of identified the lake was down like 2 foot, and I figured out in practice that the fish were pulling out of the pockets and the bushes and they were getting on laydowns. Any pocket you that had a laydown at the mouth of it, you could get bit on it. And so I went around the last day of practice, had like 125 laydowns marked, and I mean, it was every one of them. Man, you slide that thing over there and it just swimming off. And the first day, I mean, in 30 minutes, I had 15 pounds. I had a limit on the first 3 laydowns I fished, and it was just, I got the area that I was fishing, I pulled out of it about lunchtime because I had 18 pounds and I didn't want to keep burning those fish up. Then we got 3 inches of rain that night, and that whole end of the lake was trash. So I could have burned them up that first day and it would have been okay. But
You never
that was
know.
you never know exactly. They had been calling for rain down there all week and it hadn't materialized yet. So then it finally did, and it came, and the lake come up a foot, 2 foot, something like that, and most of it got dirty, so it made it fish real small. But that was a cool place. Really good lake. Had a lot of fish in it. I mean, in practice, it was crazy. I could skip a Cinco by something or a wacky rig by something. I didn't have a hook on it, and the fish will come up and get it off the top of the water. And there's only a few places I've been where I've actually had fish do that. And you just know there's a lot of fish in there when they're doing that and they're really eating good. But Santee, I had a horrible practice. It was bad. Just fish 14 hours, get 2 bites a day, could not really get on anything. Had one creek, I mean, Wabu Creek, Potato Creek area where I had multiple bites. So I just went in there and tried to figure it out. The first day I got really fortunate, caught an 8 pounder. That was the big fish of the tournament. I only had 3, but I had 12 pounds with that big one. And then kind of figured out late in the day, I went back in Talcall, which is the creek they take off from. The water had a little more color in it in there. And I caught one on a jig. Had caught one in there in practice on a worm on a dock, and I caught one on a jig. And that was kind of funny because the only reason I was throwing the jig, I had broke off my last wacky rig had rigged up. I was ill about that. I wasn't retying another one, didn't have enough time. So I just picked up my jig and started fishing docks and caught like a 2.5 pounder. So the next day I caught like 3 or 4 on the wacky rig, went back in tall call with like an hour to go, skipping docks. I caught one and coiled one in there. And then we got canceled for wind on Saturday. We fished on Sunday, Memorial Day weekend, and I had 5 blowups on a frog, got 3 of them in the boat, and they were all decent fish. And then that went away. Done a wacky rig a bunch, never got a bite. So I give myself 3 hours back in tall call and go in there and end up catching a 4 and a 6. So I end up with 21 pounds the last
You had
day.
to
But
fish a tournament on Memorial Day weekend?
at Santee. Yeah, but the weather, dude, it was
Wow.
cold and rainy. I went and bought a pair of jeans that Saturday, the off day, because I was about to freeze to death, and I didn't take any jeans with me because I'm going to the low country of South Carolina on Memorial Day weekend. You shouldn't need jeans; they shouldn't come into
No.
play. Yeah. So, but it was cold all week. I mean, I wore my rain suit. It just overcast and rainy and just windy all week. It's been such a weird spring. I mean, it's finally warming up. I
Yeah.
mean, we fished High Rock last weekend in the BFL, and the water temperature after the rain and the water come up was like 73 degrees. It warmed
Wow.
back up to like high 70s before the tournament, but it's just crazy. And then crazy how long the spawn has extended this year. John Cox was at Santee. I mean, I was beside him in a pocket, and he's sight fishing Memorial Day weekend at Santee. Those fish have been on the bed since the end of February. It's
Yeah.
crazy. So,
Yeah. I mean, as long as that water temperature doesn't get too warm, days are
yep,
long. Males are going to make beds. Doesn't mean the females are going to come up and lay eggs,
exactly.
but
Exactly. But they're going to try. They want to do
yeah,
that as long as they can. It's
that's
just
it's
very,
everywhere though. I think we've talked about it, that we've had that northwest, northeast wind for way
3
longer than
months.
we usually do. Like it hasn't shifted yet. And even though it was warm today, it was still coming out of the north.
Yeah, it's
But
been a very weird year.
we usually predominantly it's a south southwest wind during summertime. We haven't had any of that. I I can't remember the last time it's been like this for this long. And
Yep,
I mean that's why it's stayed cool. It hasn't really gotten hot yet. It's just now we're looking at 4th of July is next week. And
yep.
it's a week from now, and it's just now starting to get hot. And it's hot today.
We know that we switched to an El Nino weather pattern.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's supposed to bring more moisture to us. And I mean, honestly, it kind of has since it switched because we had more
Yes.
rain in the last 2 weeks than we've had all year.
Yep.
Like
I haven't
my
had to water
yard's
my garden. My yard looks good. It's great.
Yeah, mine was brown last week before the rain, and I didn't even have to mow, and now it's lush green, and I have to mow twice a week. So,
Yep.
but what's been going on with your year? I know you've kind of middle of the pack so far.
Middle of the pack all year. I haven't had that breakthrough. Like you mentioned, that 8 pounder you caught at Santee, which saved your day. It hasn't happened for me. Well, not once out of 10 tournament days so far this year. I've had some bad breaks. I just haven't had the bites. I haven't been, I just haven't been catching big enough fish. I've been right there. I'd either have one bad day, one good day. In the first two tournaments, I did that, and then it started middle of the pack, middle of the pack, middle of the pack. It's like it'll come. It's frustrating. The Potomac was fun. Practice was okay. It's behind just like everything else is. So the grass isn't grown up in all areas. So I fished a little small. But Belmont was busy, Aquia was busy. Um, but other areas that I like to fish weren't really grown up yet. But had fun, had some cool fish catches, and we got one more, and then we'll get ready for next year, figure out what we're gonna do and do for next year.
So I know you've spent a lot of time reflecting on your year so far. What can you put your finger on anything you think you've not done well, or what not giving you the success you want this year?
No, it's just not making the right adjustments at the right time. Like thinking one thing and then something else happens. I've tried to fish more free and more open-minded. Um, and thought I was on something Potomac a little bit different, but it just didn't work out. Um, the guys caught him flipping the grass and frogging. And I didn't realize, I mean, I learned a lot about the Potomac River this last tournament. I learned that those fish will get shallower than you think a bass would ever get.
I think they get
It's
that
amazing.
shallow in a lot of places. We just
You're
don't
probably
fish for it.
right. But you're
Yeah.
probably right. We
I
probably
don't
just
fish for
just
those
can't
fish that
get
are
to
that
them.
shallow. Yeah. I saw that at Santee when I started throwing the frog. I had this little flat point that had some like that water willow grass growing on it, and I caught like a 3.5, and then I go around the corner and there's a willow tree back there, and it's just a flat point. I mean, it's nothing. It's not even a foot deep, And I throw the frog up there, and then all of a sudden one blows up on it, and he comes off. But I watch that fish, and he just swims back, and then he just disappears. Like, I'm like, where do they go? You know, they get on a little dark spot or something, and you absolutely cannot see them.
Not unless
And
they're moving.
yeah, it's just crazy how well they blend in, and you can look up there, and there ain't nothing up there, and then okay,
Yeah.
uh,
One of the bays in Mattawoman, I was in it, and there was two other boats in front of me. And it's a small pocket, you know, it's maybe just a couple of acres. And I'm in the hydrilla, and that was perfect. But dude, you could see the bottom. And in certain areas, like anytime you touch petroleum water, you're kicking up mud. Even at high tide, I don't think it's more than 2 feet deep. But so I went in there behind those two boats at the end of the day, because I knew there was a bunch of fish in there, and I'm like, it's just like all of a sudden you're fishing all this grass, and you can see the bottom, and also you see one move, throw over there, and they eat it. It's like, what? I feel like you're fishing in nothing. They just come out of nowhere. They just appear, because you could see like it was sparse hydrilla. It wasn't like it was, you know, there were a few little mats, but it was like clumpy. But those little rascals will, if they're not moving, they camouflage pretty well.
yeah, that was something at Santee. I haven't been to Santee since I think '09, and it did not have any grass when we were down there before, other than like lily pads and stuff like that. They had killed all the bank grass and all the hydrilla and stuff, and didn't
There's
have
water
eelgrass.
willow there, right?
Yeah, water willow and eelgrass, and that
Eelgrass.
water is gin clear. I mean, you can probably see 6 to 8 foot in that water.
Wow.
Yeah, I was amazed by how clear that water was. In the lower lake, I mean, I never went all the way down. I went around the hatcheries as far as I went, but I mean, it was crazy how clear it was. And I mean, it's almost like clearer than I want to fish. Like the water in Talcall looked good. You know, it had some color to it. You probably see 1.5 foot, 2 foot in that. So it was much more, much dirtier. Didn't have any eelgrass in there either that I found. But I don't know what the deal is with the rest of that lake, how clear it is. I guess it's the eelgrass just filtering it out.
Yeah. Grass will do that to a lake. Have you been on like Belush Creek? That grass is just gone crazy, dude. It's taken over like 2/3 of the lake. It's drawn out to 17, 18 feet of water. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
that's what I've heard. So it's growing around the docks and stuff as well.
Yeah.
I'm sure the
So,
homeowners will come in and
yep.
take care of that.
Yeah. Seth said it shouldn't, once the water temperature gets to 80 degrees, it should start dying off. And it's not green anymore. It's starting to turn brown. So he might be right, because it's getting close to 80 degrees. I think last night we fished that little derby. I think it was 81 degrees near the hot hole. So it's getting there. It'll be interesting to see if it stays or it dies. But dude, it came out of nowhere. Like there was a few little sprigs, and then the next thing you know, like in the matter of months, it's everywhere. It's at the dam. So yeah, if it doesn't die off, they'll probably kill it.
That's cool though. Maybe it'll help lose out to give the at least this year's spawn,
I
give
mean,
them somewhere to hide.
yeah, they're starting to. We're catching way more largemouth now than we have the last couple of years.
That's cool. You know, and we got another thing to talk about for North Carolina. They've got that F1,
F1s.
the F1 stocking program.
Yeah.
They're putting a bunch of them in. I saw this week they've been putting some out, so that'll be really cool.
Gaston, Norman,
Jordan.
Jordan. Yeah.
Yep.
They're gonna do it for 5 years, they said.
Yep. Be interesting to see in
I wonder why they
20.
picked those three legs.
I
I
don't know. I
guess
really wish they put.
geographically they're spaced out. Norman's kind of on the west.
Well,
You
so
got
it's
the
kind
Raleigh
of
area lake, and then you got Gaston, which is towards the eastern end.
you got the guy that's heading that up. I think he fishes Gaston all the time like that. I think that's his big lake. He fishes a lot,
Oh,
so I think that might have something to
yeah,
do with that. But
that
that's
makes
cool. You know,
sense.
I mean,
Yeah, whatever.
Gaston used to be a really good lake. I mean, I fished a
Yeah,
lot of BFLs up there over the years, and it used to be a lot of fun. You know, you catch a lot of fish up there. But I think the last time I went up there, and what I've seen and heard, it's not been that good.
yeah, it's cool. Like
Jordan,
pads, grass, docks, fish
I don't
deep,
think
clear.
Jordan necessarily needed F1s. I think it was in good shape without them. But putting F1s in there, I mean, there's no telling how big those fish will get. You know,
Yeah,
Norman,
it'll be. I mean, Jordan would be the lake that I don't know that you'd really want to mess with right now.
exactly, exactly. Yeah, I'd really like to see F1s get put in bugs. I heard rumors that Virginia was putting them in. So I don't know if there was any truth to that or not, but I think I'd like to see some in bugs.
Have you caught
Bugs.
any spots out of bugs yet?
I caught some in the midsection of the lake. They were short and fat. I supposedly like Eastland Creek area. That's where the majority of them are being caught at. But I just hope it doesn't do what it
It's
has
going
done.
to. There's bluebacks in that lake. They're gonna get friggin' jumbo in that lake though. They should anyway.
Maybe I don't know. We haven't seen that anywhere else in North Carolina, but maybe they will there. I remember when they first got in Gaston, that was kind of when the A rig would first come out. They were catching like 20 pound, 20 to 25 pound bags up there of spots, uh, in the wintertime, and then it's petered out now. So who knows?
Interesting.
Yeah. So where's your next event? It's lacrosse, right?
Yeah.
You got
Headed
a bunch of
to
Dave's tournament
Wisconsin.
tackle swim jigs.
Of course.
Absolutely.
I'm looking forward to it. It should be fun. It's somewhere I've never been before. So
It's always cool to go see a new place.
it is.
It just it kind of stinks that that stuff is so far away where you can't go pre-practice or whatever to
No, there's no
big
pre-practice
vast.
and a 17-hour drive.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's just like us. I really wish I would have went up there and spent some time scanning, but um, I don't know. I didn't want to. It all depends on what the wind does, whether you're going to be able to go fish for smallmouth anyway. So I didn't fool with it, and now it looks like I'll be able to smallmouth fish. So gonna have to figure it out.
Yeah, it'll be fun. You'll have a good time. Anytime you go up north, it's always you're gonna catch fish.
Yeah, you're not going fishing. You're going catching.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
do I leave this school of 4 pounders to go find 4.5s? Do I leave this school of 3.5s to go find 4s?
I hope I had that problem. I really do. Last time they were up there, it only took, I think it was 57. It was like 17 a day. Maybe it was
When
51
were they up there?
last year in the summertime. Yeah, it was 51. It was like 17 and a half a day is what won the tournament. So I thought that was kind of light. I mean,
It
it's also
is.
Lake Huron, but we take off all the way in the back of Saginaw Bay. The bay is like 90 miles long and 20 miles wide. And you got to run about 50 miles to get into where smallmouth, what they call the outer bay. And really, I mean, if you run out to fish on Lake Huron, you're looking at a 100-mile run, 110-mile run. So it's a lot. You need a lot to go right to be able to make that work. You're running that far and on a Great Lake that gets really rough. There's so much stuff that can go wrong.
Oh yeah, it's the same thing with St. Lawrence when you put in at Messina and you want to fish down in Clayton. Same thing, barges,
Paddle boarders,
paddle
taxi boats.
boarders, turtles,
The
all
la, the
kinds,
la,
all kinds of stuff in the water.
the last year I was at Thousand Islands. So the water was high. It was like 2 foot high or whatever, and they had the entire U.S. side. It was like no wake, like 500 yards from the bank. It was some crazy thing. And there's some parts of that river that's not 500 yards wide. So that whole section would be no wake. Boy Duck had actually got a ticket in an elite event the
You
week
should have
before
been
we were up.
disqualified.
And
Put him in jail.
like the week before that. And so what everybody was doing was running over to the Canadian side in Clayton and then running the Canadian side because they didn't have that rule in effect.
Yeah.
It's some of the coolest boating I've ever done in my life. Like you come up on these little things and it's like little intersections and stuff. It's pretty cool.
Cool boating.
Cool boating and extremely cool fishing. What do you bring? Hey, what do you bring to the house?
Me?
Yeah, if Martin's a good cook, what do you bring to the house?
All right, let me be clear. When Martin cooks, he's a really good cook. Everything else is done by me.
You do the dishes?
I do the dishes. I clean up.
Are
I
you
book the
Martin?
houses.
Oh, you're recording again. Damn.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm recording. So welcome, Martin. We appreciate you doing this on a Wednesday night.
Yes, sir.
I know you got the kids and everything, so we won't keep you for too long, but we just did want to pick your brain and get to let the public get to know Martin Villa. I'm sure a lot of what's that?
I said, be careful picking around too much in that brain.
Yeah, no, we're not going to go down that road. I've seen that side for a while now, but we'll keep that on the road, and we'll keep it clean on here. But you're having an unbelievable year. You're kicking my ass and you're kicking everybody else's ass except for one guy. So you're killing it. What's changed between last year and this year that's making you fish a lot better and have this success that you're having?
Well, you learn, it's a learning process. Obviously, last year and every year, because I mean, it's whether it's only a rookie mistake when it's your rookie year, but they're just rookie mistakes that you make, and learning to evolve to compete against a large field of far better than average anglers. You realize how high the bar is. And if you're not at least aiming at or near that bar, you won't even hit it anyways. And so like, it's, my success is it's almost been surreal. Like I look back at, think back at what I've accomplished the past year just on like the daily weights. And it hasn't really been that pretty. It's been a dogfight. There's some tournaments like where I remember key bites that I got when I needed them the most. And, that's a blessing in disguise at any moment like that. And, so it's like, it hasn't all been like, hey, this is what I'm doing and I'm doing this properly and everything. But it definitely, I've learned that if you don't adapt with the fishing pressure, then you can get left behind on this. And these large scale tournaments, like these 150 boat tackle warehouse tournaments and the Bassmaster Opens and stuff like that, a lot of the most obvious stuff is picked clean well in practice, and learning to evolve in a week with the fishing in a week-long tournament is really the key to success. And I've never actually really been able to fish for a week straight. It's always been on a Saturday here or, a local derby because I'm a construction worker, but learning to fish, learning to look ahead for 7 days worth of fishing has definitely got me further in this gig.
When you say look ahead, do you mean like weather patterns?
Yeah, that, and just, you got to realize that like the fishermen are so good that the most obvious stuff, it's like a chess match almost, like the second most obvious stuff. Like you could almost like in your head imagine the first three things that you're going to do, because most of us bass fishermen are very similar. So you think, hey, this little thing might work. Well, 120 out of the other 150 are thinking of that too. And so just like on the Potomac River, the actual proper bite fizzled away because of the third day of practice. A lot of times, like there's a difference between the 2 days and 3 days that we have just on the fishing pressure on our fisheries.
Yeah.
And so like I was looking for a chunk and wine bite that I know rules the roost on that river, and I was looking for it at the higher tide. And I knew several other people that were just smoking them. But come tournament time, when you're just catching a big one here, a big one there, you're catching the big active fish. And tournament time, it went away. And so if that's all you had, you died with it. And so like if you judged me by like if you compared all 150 anglers after their first day of practice, I would probably be at the bottom of the barrel. But I've been learning that that these fish are going to not only evolve with the weather, the temperatures, and sunlight, moon phase, whatever you can think of, but when you put 150 pros on the water, they kind of put their thumbs on the scale a little bit on what the fish do.
All right,
Fishing
so a perfect example of that would be like Eufaula, because that lake fished really small based on water clarity and such. And I know there were some guys that fished in some dirtier water, but that place fished pretty small oh crap, we can't see anything about that because
You can,
fishing
you
there,
can.
aren't you?
I got it. I got it. Good. You're good. I got it. Okay.
Okay. But Lake Eufaula, like, take me through the process of the 3 days of practice and the 3 days during the tournament, because there was only a certain part of the lake that was fishable basically at that time of the year, and everything was changing too. So take me through that.
Yeah, so the Eufaula was red mud, like 80% of it, and there were some clear pockets, I guess, where there was some fresher water, but it pretty much turned this giant 100,000+ acre lake into 2 little ponds, or 3 ponds, I guess. And especially because, if it was old school bass fishermen that were not forward shooting sonar guys, they probably would have dispersed more, but sonar fishermen particularly look for the clear water. And anyways, I found some fish at the beginning of practice in these little grassy pockets. And there was only like a half a dozen of them. And I just happened, and actually the grass was a little bit shallower than you normally would have went and fish, but it was just like, I kept looking for what shoreline structure they were going to spawn on. And I was like, this is the only thing I can find. And so anyways, day one, I went and checked them. And then by the afternoon of day one, talking to the few other pros that we share information, including you, we all kind of realized that there was some spawning fish out there, but there's a very select few areas for them. And when you're imagining 150, leaving Clarksville, Georgia, where it was just a giant mecca of spawning ground, to coming to this one creek arm that had these few pockets. Well, day two, and there was a big swim bait bite that went on during practice, and the obvious aggressive fish were picked clean. And so day two, I went to a different area and I found a more offshore bite that was more related to the offshore bite near the spawning grounds. And I was grateful for that, because that's what's really been, one of the keys to success at this level is to have more than one way to catch them. And so anyways, day three, what I've learned over fishing multiple days is you always want to go check your spawning areas out to see what has changed. It's the easiest way to tell if you're looking ahead or you're looking behind. And so I went back to these spawning areas and saw new fish and realized that it was trending this way. And so, yes, there's very few areas that have spawning ground. And a lot of times, if you have a large population of fish, that those main spawning areas, those fish will just come and reload. So anyways, day one, day two of the tournament, I went to my offshore bite. I caught some good fish over there. That's when Michael Neal was next to me, and he caught that 5. So I knew I was around the right fish. But by the end of day two, I was struggling to catch a keeper. And everybody in the field seemed to have that that glassy look over their face, like, I don't know how I'm going to manage 5. Well, day 3, I realized that there was only 50 of us, and that I know that this feeling that I had was the same feeling that everybody else had about those little grassy coves. And so I felt like day 2, there was nearly the pressure. Everybody thought that those fish were plucked. Well, when I went there day 3, it was a fresh reload fish, and I was able to finesse them. But if I hadn't came back there at day 3 in practice, I wouldn't have ever come back there on day 3 of the tournament.
Yeah.
So just simple things like that, checking out. And then the other thing is like, I believe, like they said, that swim bait bite that developed during practice died, and the guys who relied on that, I think there was some big fish caught on swim baits, but they weren't catching having the 15, 20 bites a day fish. So it's just, in that tournament, I finessed those fish more. I think I caught the bulk of them on a shaky head.
I got you. Are you building something?
No.
You beating your kid?
Are you beating your children?
Right.
We're not. Yeah, never mind. I can't say that either.
Yeah, there's not much you can say.
Yeah. Hey, try spanking Todd a little more on the road. Just beat him a little bit.
That's what we got Cole for.
Yeah, that's true. That's what we got Cole for. I knew there was a reason we brought him along. He's the pretty one.
Yeah.
What else? So Brad, what do you want to talk to Martin about?
No, man, I'm all ears. I'm just listening. No, it's
You're
good.
all ears. You just
I've
wanna learn?
already
So-
I've already learned a couple of things.
The other thing that I want you to kind of talk about is you fished one way at Okeechobee, actually 3 different ways at Okeechobee. You fished 2 or 3 different ways at Clark's Hill. You fished a bunch of different ways at Eufaula. You bed fished at Lake of the Ozarks and at the Potomac. So you kind of talked about the Potomac a little bit, and we talked about it a little bit before. And it's probably with the people that listen to us, Potomac's probably the closest one that people would find value in what you have to offer. And everybody wants to know what you know on the Potomac River. But as we talked during the week, you talked about how everything constantly changes every year, and you're right, based on where the grass was, and it was a little bit behind where it usually is this time of the year. We all said that, but was there a certain area that you've stayed in, or did you run the entire river based on where the tide was at a given time?
Yeah,
Because
I mean, there was
we
really,
started at the same place both days.
well, so I was talking to Jody about it, and I told him, I said that I knew I was on the pattern that I was fishing, or the way that I was catching my heaviest weight. I knew that I was losing that tide. And there's usually every 2 weeks, there's like a period of 3 or 4 days where there's just a struggle bus. And I've seen where, like, you hear people talking, oh, 14. And, during the spawn and early season, these fish chew all tides, especially during the spawn because they're stationed and they're in the guard defense mode. But in post spawn, once that comes, they're feeding heavily, but usually there's a big tournament or 2 or stretches of them because it's definitely a high pressured fishery. Where once the fish get pressured, the tide window just completely, the bite window on the tide will shrink down to, a matter of 15, 20 minutes, and on the bigger fish. And so I chased a high tide, the higher tide by all in practice, trying to find an area for where I could just, bunker down and fish for 4 hours, knowing that I was going to throw over top of, 3.5 to 5 pound bass. And I could never find it. But in the mornings, I would run north. And because the fishery at the time was fishing like 2 different fisheries. So the creeks down south were so far progressed compared to what was up north. So actually how you caught them south was not really how you caught them up north. And actually at the time of year, I would actually have preferred to fish north. And if the tournament had started on the Thursday, what could have, would have, should have, but a couple more hours in the cycle on our tide cycle was the difference between running up north and whacking them and actually saving your mid-river and southern fish. But I utilized up north all the way up to just below Greenway and Mattawoman, and then all the way down to Potomac Creek and Aquia. And the whole, I felt I did recognize kind of the hometown curse because, you can be better off sometimes just putting yourself into a creek and fishing the thing, as opposed to knowing all of these little sneak holes and little spots that you used to catch them at and could, so there's, if I could have done it over again, I probably would have stuck it out in one area in the mornings and came back to what I had to do in the evening. And if you had had a 2-hour earlier window, just a couple hour earlier window of tide, then you can maximize your low tide fishing. And really, truthfully, if you want to know anything about catching big fish on all tidal waters, the first half hour to hour of incoming is when the biggest fish in your spot will bite.
Really?
Yes. And both times in that tournament, I had multiple 5-pound bites as soon as the tide would turn. I wasn't fishing clean, but what I was fishing, it's hard to fish clean.
Now, when you say that about the tide turning, so are you going to look at where the water's coming back to, or are you still fishing like those mouths and ditches and stuff?
Well, so one of the spots that so a perfect example, if you're in the incoming tide is usually anywhere, unless it's like a specific current break, like an outgoing, like jetty or something like that, where only, some places only set up properly in the outgoing or in the incoming. But typically, if you have whether it's a grass bed or a creek or anything, you'll catch all sizes of fish through any types of tides. However, I've seen many times where they'll go from the last 2 hours of outgoing, you'll have 2 pound fish that'll turn into 4.5 pound fish as soon as the tide turns back in. And you can pretty much experiment with that anywhere you go, and after you've done it several times, you'll realize that on average that bite is bigger as soon as the income. I don't know if it's like they realize that it's time to feed and that this is their moment or what it is, but you know, and you can catch them on the lower half of outgoing. You can catch them on the higher part. It just depends. Where I messed up on was, and I knew this from experience here, was that the brim bed bite will hold during high tide, and I just was too committed to the dock talk, chunk and wind offshore grass bite that is usually historic bread and butter Potomac River, week in, week out, that's how you win on that river. And so I just, instead of looking, because the reason why the brim bed will hold up is because it's already in the shallowest settings of the grass, and they're usually protected. And sometimes the extra 6 inches of water will comfort those fish. And so they're kind of like a different, as opposed to the outer edge of the grass fish where the higher tide comes in and it brings the catfish in. And a lot of times with the salinity as high as it was, the lower tide can be, it can be harder on the fish at the higher tide. And so the lower tide is more important too, because it's just a cleaner water.
So tidal fishing, I mean, Martin's one of the best tidal fishermen there is. It's a completely different animal, man. I learned that between the James and the Potomac, and I've had some success in tidal water before, but the only time I've ever had success is when I anchor down and just fish one area. Martin knows how to run the tides. Cody, he knows how to run the tide. Brian, all those guys have fished those tidal waters, man. It's a completely different game. It's completely different. You can get lucky, but if you get out of rhythm, even just a little bit, running the tide, you're screwed. You could be in an area where, if you were there 20 minutes earlier, it's funny because Martin and I put up on the same spot the second day or first day, end of the first day. And he said, dude, if you were there like 30 minutes earlier, you would have caught him. Because I got there a little bit late. So I went back the final day. I went there an hour before check-in, and which was 30 minutes before, and caught him pretty good. I mean, I didn't catch him great, but I caught my biggest fish of the day there. So, but yeah, it's completely different. I learned a lot about the Potomac River and how shallow those fish get. I did notice halfway through I guess it was the end of the first day, that when the tide got lower, that grass that was higher on higher tide then became a mat, and those fish were just sitting underneath those mats. I mean, in a foot of water. It was crazy how shallow those fish will get. I don't know how deep you were catching them, but why do you think that chunk and wind thing just didn't work out? Because I don't know. I mean, some of the guys caught them, but the guys that caught them really good were either flipping or throwing like a wacky rig around brim beds. Why do you think that chunk and winding deal didn't work?
Well, see, the thing is it's like it's catching the big dominant fish, and so like the historic Potomac, back in the a decade or more ago when it was full of Florida strains, it was just you're swinging for the 5 to 8 pound bite, and you don't have that 5+ pound bite on the Potomac anymore. It's rare, and or 6+ pound bite. And the other problem was like the northern milfoil beds were far behind, and then you had the Belmont area which is full of it, but it just seemed like to me the grass beds, it was either bloomed out like it should be in July, or they were like May grass beds. And I just think that there was just a lack of large milfoil beds to absorb the fishing pressure. And so everybody found the same 100-yard stretches. And one by one, once you wind jackhammers through them, they just, I've seen this happen in the Toyota last year. The chunk and line bite is how everybody found them. And then the ones who couldn't adjust to it during the tournament, were left behind.
Yeah.
And really, I don't like it. I've always been an underthinker when it comes to bass fishing, but tidal bass fishing, you can't overthink it enough. And the only problem with it is you have to decide when you need to be like, hey, I need to be here at 10:27, or I'm just going to sit in here and wind this bait to here. And sometimes, like you said, like the times you've done good, it's the only patch of grass that you know where their fish is. So you're going to force feed those fish. And sometimes that's the key to success. And it seemed like to me that it was in this tournament. But if you can give a man a 4-hour window on running the tides and he knows his fisheries, he can be very difficult to beat. And we just didn't have that window. The first day it was a couple-hour window, but and the Potomac's a unique thing. That's the good thing about living in Virginia, is because there's such a vast amount of fisheries that are just like right next to each other. The Rappahannock is completely different than the Potomac, and the James River is completely different than those ones. The James River is the James in New York is like the northernmost range of the cottonmouth water moccasin. And so there's cypress all up and down the James, but you go to the Potomac and try to find one.
Martin
So,
loves snakes. Side note, everywhere we go, he's constantly looking for snakes.
Well, you need to go to you need to go to Wright Patman in Texas, because I had 2 of them try to get in the boat. I had to hit with an 8-foot flipping stick, and they were just laying in trees everywhere, dude. Them big old short fat things.
The Chickahominies like that. The Lower James. We traveled last year. We went all over the country in cottonmouth land, and then we came into I'm more in the James than I did anywhere.
Yeah, those dudes that duck hunt on the James, they go out there and get them duck blinds before daylight. There's no freaking way, dude.
No, that ain't happening. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good. So so being able to experience each one differently. The one thing about the Potomac, which as far as like the higher tide goes, is what I've learned is when in doubt, if you can just fish the main river grass beds, you can catch them at all tides. On the James River, though, you kind of lack that communal wide open grass stuff that you can fish. There are, in the spring when they're spawning in certain areas and whatnot, it's different. But, some of the tidal waters where you're solely fishing hard cover, they can be, your windows are smaller a lot of times. And so like a place like the Rappahannock, is a lot of hard covering, and it has the vegetation too, the paths and the grass and all that too. So it's just fishing the Chesapeake Bay watershed, not just the upper bay, but you want to learn how to fish tidal water. There's no better place to do it than right there.
And you're how far? Which one's closest to you? Rappahannock?
The James, probably. I'm like an hour and 40 from Osborne, an hour and Rapp, and 2 from the Potomac.
I got
you. So I fish the Potomac way more than I do any of them, but I'm usually not there. I'm fishing for striped bass most of the time when I'm there.
Yeah, Martin doesn't bass fish in the off season, by the way. He fishes for every other species besides bass.
I think you learn a lot fishing for different things.
Oh yeah, it's just and you get there's something to be said about fishing, fishing. There's a familiar feeling to fishing something unfamiliar to me, and so I have no problem traveling. Like I didn't want that thing on that Potomac River.
Yeah,
I didn't sleep for like weeks over that tournament. Before that tournament, because I just I knew I've been on both sides of that sword on that thing, and that river can burn you just like it can be, fruitful. So
yeah,
you're catching the crap out of them, or you're not catching them.
Yeah.
You've done very well. You fished the invitationals. Is this your second year or third year?
Second.
That's what I was thinking. But you've had 2 good years this year for sure. What's been your go-to bait for the last 2 years that really got you bit when nothing else was, or just your confidence bait?
You can't go wrong with a drop shot, dude. If you want to survive at these large tournaments like this, being able to finesse fish, you always have to fall back on that. And a drop shot will catch them in any setting. If you only had one rod to put on your deck, I believe it would be a drop shot, because you can go up north and catch them, you can go down Florida and catch them.
What's your drop shot setup?
It just depends on what you're going. I typically I use gamma line, And whether if I'm smallmouth fishing, I'm using the Gamma Touch, and if I'm fishing down the tidal water, I'm using the Gamma Edge. And it depends on the depth and everything, but I typically like to use those blue tungsten. I like a painted weight, a painted tungsten weight, and Tamagotchi split shot drop shot hook, or one of those weedless drop shot hooks, depending on what you're if you're fishing brush or something like that. Like
Cover
Sam
shot,
Rayburn
right?
last year. Yeah, cover shot. That's what it's called. The owner
Yeah.
cover shot.
Yeah.
Like Rayburn last year, I think at my first tournament, I just I went down there with 20 lures and rods on the deck, and within an hour I picked up the drop shot, and boom,
Within an
started catching them.
hour, dude, you didn't even start your big motor where we put in at the first day. You just dropped the trolling motor and picked up a spinning rod. I'm like, what are you doing? We're at Rayburn. And what ended up happening was that's how we caught them.
Yeah, well, I remember we both picked up traps at first because it was grass, and I threw a lipless crankbait for about, all I saw was Sam Rayburn, Rayburn Red,
Yeah.
blah 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 blah, and he like catching 50-pound sacks. I'm like, oh man, we're gonna go have a lipless crankbait fun fest. Like this is gonna be fun. About 50 casts into that lipless crankbait, I was like, screw this, and I just happened to blow out on that point a little bit deeper, and I was like, oh, what is that right there? Let me drop a drop shot on that. Boom.
Yep.
What is your
Go ahead.
what's your favorite bait on the drop shot?
I don't know, just small. It kind of depends on the situation. Like, I'll tell you what, if you're around tidal water and you don't have like a morning dawn robo worm and your co-angler behind you does, you will go buy a pack of those the next time you're at the tackle shop. And that's on all those tidal waters. And but if you're up there fishing smallies, man, like I don't even know if it matters, because I will say on the St. Lawrence, if you better have some flatworms. And I know you can catch them on anything else but that thing, but if there's one fishery that I will throw a flatworm on, that's that one. Champlain, I don't think it matters. I think it's just get them coming, and if you're around a dumb fish, he's going to come get it. I do like, finesse worms for bass, for largemouth drop shot. You can't go wrong with a Zoom finesse worm or something similar.
Yeah. Good info.
Yeah, he told me it was Rayburn. He's like, dude, throw a cotton candy finesse worm. I'm like, what? Are you serious? Because we didn't see each other, and it was a couple hours after we just put our boats in the water, and he started fishing out deep. And he's like, dude, put on a cotton candy finesse worm. I thought he was messing with me. Nope. It's what he ended up catching them on.
Yeah, all of them. I was like scrounging down to my last few. And it was like you could throw the other color. You just got to experiment. This is what it is. And
Martin likes to experiment.
Yeah,
that's a different podcast.
That's right.
So are you a big color guy? Like you go through a lot of different colors or whatever? You just have a couple of colors that you kind of roll with?
I have changed colors and turned back around, and it was like you never fished it.
Really?
Yeah, and certain water temperatures like can change things. I know that the spring that cotton candy will shine, and I knew that just from fishing bass. Enough bass that if you're going to fish in the water, if you're going to drop shot in the spring around largemouth, and mostly clean water, I would say. When you're shuffling through your base, you got to have something that's pinkish. That morning dawn, that cotton candy, to a bass out in 20 feet of water, it might not make a difference.
Yeah.
But in the spring, it's definitely worth it somewhere in your rotation when you're experimenting. Because there's a difference between, just a change in color can be the difference when you're catching 2 fish off that hole and catching 10.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And then I'll tell you another key, and one of the other things that really increase your chances of success is finding multiple colors to be able to change on those fish. If you have 3 different colors, you'll be able to come back and catch the rest of them. of the same thing. So like if you have like, you'll find this one confidence color, and after two, like when you're fishing 3-4 days, man, after 2 days, the fish are like, yeah, we like that thing too, buddy, but you're not going to fool us.
Yeah.
And so,
And what you said about the highly pressured stuff is 100% spot on. I mean, I fished the opens before. You get 200 boats out there. The shallow fish are just beat up by the time the tournament starts. It's hard to do any good in those tournaments fishing shallow.
well, and that's so true, but it's also flip flopping too.
There's a forward
Depending
facing
on,
sonar.
yes, like man, that's a perfect example. Like when Kyle Hall won last year in Champlain, when I told him, I was like, dude, I didn't catch him off my sonar. He's like, what? And I was like, yeah, dude. I was like, I was like proud of myself that I'd like dialed into like a chunk and wine bite at the certain. There was one like crazy slow speed. I had to reel that 8-3 reel. Like I had one, and I was too scared to change to a slower reel because I knew exactly how I needed to be fishing this thing. And I was telling him, I was like, man, I didn't need my forward shooting sonar to catch all them fish on Champlain. He's like, what? If I didn't have that, I wouldn't have caught a single one. And so, like what used to be the untouched nursery of these lakes are now the highest pressure. Like when we were at Clark's Hill, like the first thing you did is everybody ran down to the clear water and dropped the trolling motor down and went out in the middle.
Yep.
So actually in Clark's Hill, the guys that were fishing the pushes were probably in the minority. And like I remember just talking to them.
Yeah, it's the cool thing right now. It's just that everybody you see, it's all about forward facing sonar. I mean, that's everybody's got. Yeah, they watch the BPT guys blast them.
They're getting, the fish are getting wiser to it. So it depends if you keep going back to the same fisheries, they're going to get progressively harder to catch. Especially, I mean, those big smallies, man. There's like 15, 20-year-old fish and big largemouths too. Like a Floridian largemouth is, I'm not saying he's easier to catch, but it's a younger fish, so you just think mathematically it's a dumber fish. It's like the cobia that come in the bay. When they come in fresh off the ocean, they're like, like it's a very fast growing fish. So like, they don't live past 7 years old. So a 40-inch, a keeper cobia is 3 years old. When he comes in, he's stupid. After a few people threw eels and swim baits at him and bucktails at him, they get pretty hard to catch. And I've noticed, and I know everybody else using forward shooting sonar have noticed that when you hit that fish now, you're going to get one of three reactions. Either he's going to go opposite way or he's going to come to your boat and may or may not hit your lure. And, the fish recognize these boats now. They just like, you come to a hole and, I mean, at Hartwell, like if you just come, like when I practiced Hartwell this past spring, and I caught the snot out of them. But if you just got around the fish, they would immediately come to the boat, check you out. And, pre-spawn spots are usually pretty dumb, but they're getting wiser because of that forward shooting sonar. And it's just video gaming. I mean, there's a lot of, as long as you got your technique down, you curb the lack of knowledge. And I've always, as soon as I saw that technology, I was like, oh, that's not good, because you can give some kid this who has nothing but time on their hands, and they're going to surpass what you know in just a few years. And that's what's happening, I believe.
I took a couple of guys from Garmin out today, and the one guy said, what's the biggest thing about forward facing sonar that you like? And I'm like, you just learned so much about bass behavior, things that you never knew really existed until you actually watched it on a screen. I mean, you hear rumors, you hear how they hunt together, especially in deep, clear lakes. Those spotted bass, they hunt together like sharks and dolphins, how they work together to herd up bait. You can't really, until forward-facing sonar, you never really saw that. You see it with the underwater camera, but to actually watch it on live scope was pretty cool, and to see how shallow those fish do get. And when I mean shallow, I mean like out over 60, 70 feet of water, how much they suspend, and what they're just sit out there and just be, and then a lot of it has to do with fishing pressure. And they I think it was you that told me last year when you had your boat, I think you had spot lock on, and the fish didn't even care, but your boat was the only shade that was in that whole area. It was the biggest part of shade. So those fish would just come right to your boat, suspend underneath your boat.
Hmm. Yeah, and if he stayed, if you hit the motor and he spooked, you couldn't, no point in throwing that fish.
Yeah.
Because when the trolling motor, if you spot locked on that fish, and one of the group that came to you would, or two of them would sit right up under your trolling motor, down on the on the bottom. And if you were like, so when you're handling culling, I swear, like 2 out of 5 times I culled on Champlain last year, I would sit there and do, how smallie fishing is. You're like trying to balance beam these things.
Yeah.
You waste 5 minutes on an ounce. And anyways, I get back up there, and when there was a mark there, I knew I was going to catch that fish.
Okay.
The smaller ones dispersed, and that one right there, I'd drop on them and catch them every time.
Just straight down vertical.
Yep, he just would be sitting under the trolling motor. That's where they want to go for some reason when they sit up under that. I don't know if they just, I don't know what it is. And I think that those fish, like weeks, just a couple weeks mean a lot on how finicky they are with your, after, summertime, they've had or in New York, they've had all winter to not be pressured. And then once everybody gets there and starts throwing at them one by one, they all kind of get taught a lesson. And, last year on the St. Lawrence, even Special Sheffield said, he's like, I catch 1 out of 5 fish throwing to him during the August, and he said, come that Toyota series, he's like, man, it was like 1 out of 50.
Yeah.
So I mean, they're wising up, but I do believe that everybody out there looking up makes the old school bank fisherman. He can come back into play too. It just has to come, be the right settings, in the right circumstances. If you're out there fishing for spots, or unless they're like Norman spots where they're, spotted bass, when he's shallow, he's just like a largemouth. He'll like put his back up against a stump or something. But when he's out there, like the forward shooting sonar, like at Hartwell, there'd be a school. I was chasing school in spots, and there'd be a school of 15. And if you watch, like every one of them would take a turn coming after your lure. It was kind of wild to watch that. And the way I caught them that day is if you went to, like, I was throwing a big swim bait, and in the pre-spawn spawn, a spot's a little bit different than a largemouth. Largemouth wants to put his belly up against something. The female does, especially. She wants to put her belly up and warm her eggs up. And the spot, a lot of times, the female spot will actually ride up higher. Like when they're cruising, she'll be up on the top, because the Hartwell's clear. So, she swims 15 feet down. She's sunning out in that lower end of that lake. And so I recognized that on the sonar, and I picked up a big shallow swim bait. And it was painful to wind over them. And you'd watch, like she would be cruising through there, and the males would come up and hit it first. And every time I would jerk, another male would, or a female would smoke it. Like it was just the group mentality of like, we're just going to come here, punch some bait up, and then everybody's going to eat. So we're not like greedy. So they were just trying to knock it off because it was like a 6-inch swim bait, and or a 5.5-inch swim bait. But what I learned was, as long as I kept winding it true, the next fish would take its swat at it. And as long as they didn't in their mind, my belief is they didn't injure it. And so when it came big female time, she was just a little bit bigger, and she had just a little bit greedier, and she would smoke it. And so I was able to, like at the beginning of that day, I was catching all the 2.25 pound, 2.5 pound spots on like the 3.5-inch swim baits. The swim bait you're supposed to be using. First cast I get them, but as I progressed throughout the day and was able to learn using my sonar what these fish were doing, that I upped my swim bait size and kept it true. And after about the 10th fish that hit it, when it was her turn, she would get it. And so instead of catching the 2.25 pound males out of all the schools, I was catching the 4-pound females out of all the schools. And that little bit of adjustment, and I wouldn't have known that without the forward shooting sonar, changed the difference between having a 14-pound spotted bag to it was an over 20-pound Hartwell bag, which is a big Hartwell bag.
Yeah, that's a real big Hartwell bag.
Yeah.
So Champlain, we haven't talked since Champlain. Tell me about that. You just got back from Champlain.
Yeah, it was a short practice, man. I got up there and had the woman and kids, and it was, I think we got on the water about 8, and I knew that I was going to have 8 hours of fishing. And so I was like, I'll spend 4 hours on New York, 4 hours on Vermont. First place, actually, I went to that area where me and you fished and went in shallower. I never went to those pin marks. I felt foolish about it later on. Like, I went in shallower, never actually truly went to those spots. And anyways, I got in there and I caught a big one. Like, man, it was like a 5-pound frame. It only weighed 4 pounds. And then they caught another one like 3.5. And I was like, let me fish around here, but it's Champlain. I should be able to just keep catching it. Man, I couldn't catch them there. I don't know what I was doing wrong. And I know my buddy, he caught them up extremely shallow. Had like a couple 3 and 3/4 pounders. And I went over to the Vermont side. I don't know, about 1 o'clock, I'd say 12 o'clock. And we went over there, and I went to the area that I fished over there, and I caught a bunch of fish. Nothing big, but I was catching 3-pounders. And that area that I fished was full of 3-pound, 5-ounce fish. And so we got over there, and the kids caught some fish, and we went swimming, enjoyed it. So it was kind of just like a blink, and it was 4:30. We had to be off the water. Well, day one, I went and fished in the York side with a big one where I got the bigger bites, and I left there skunked other than like a 28-inch walleye. And went over the Vermont side and immediately caught 17 plus pounds of fish, but I killed a couple of them. I killed my live well about 2:30. I was struggling to keep fish alive. I think I killed 5 on day 2. Not all 5 of them were mine, but when you're catching only 17.5 pounds, which was it's the difference between when you're losing pounds of weight at Champlain, you're hurting yourself, period. And actually I lost my 2 biggest fish on day 2 because I went straight over the Vermont fish. And what I learned was the fish that I was fishing were spawning, but they were deeper spawning. And as I progressed further out, when you're on spawning flats in Champlain, and what I learned was that that as they want those flats where they can, at the earlier part, they're in the 3 to 6 feet of water, and as the spawn progresses, I had a couple 4+ pound bites on day 2. They're out in like 11, 12 feet of water. I had to look for those boulders, but when you found them, it was like you knew. And so I lost 2 good fish that should have put me in the mid-19s, but I'm grateful I didn't really catch them because they might have been the ones that had died. And so I did have one deep hooked fish that bled, and I think that he might have. And then coming back from coming from the Potomac, I sprayed my boat down. But one thing I did not remember to do was to check my aerator system, and I'm positive. Yes, I am positive. There's some Potomac River crawdad in there that killed my fish.
That's possible. I found a bunch of crawdads in my live well after I got home.
Yeah, I wasn't seeing them, so but you know how it is one slips through there.
Yeah,
so, and that's usually what happens. One time years ago, we kept some blue crabs in a Potomac River tournament, and I was going up there. We were fishing team tournaments every weekend, and I would swing by Fredericksburg on the way back. I'd buy a dozen crabs. And back then they were like $20, and I was like, man, why am I paying $20 when we're swimming around crabs? The crabs were swimming around the boat, and I put like a dozen in the live well, and we went to go weigh them fishing, and I killed like 19 pounds worth of bass
because of the crabs.
Yeah, they got fighting in the live well, killed a couple of them, poisoned the whole live well.
The crabs were fighting. Wow.
Yeah, and so it went from having like a good finish, like I think went from third and no check. And I said, well, I'll never do that again.
Yeah. Well, we've been going for almost an hour. I don't want to take up your whole night because I know your wife's can probably murder you. And
yeah,
I'm sure you want to hang out with your kids.
Mm-hmm. Well, I appreciate this.
Well, we appreciate it, man. I think it's good information. I think people are going to really like it. When are you leaving from Wisconsin? Are you going to do it in 2 days or 1 day? Or do you want to?
I'm thinking about doing it's a long, I think it's like 15, 16 hours. So
yeah.
I was thinking about leaving the afternoon and trying to knock 5, 6 hours off it and span it in 2 days.
All right. I'll be
About
in
leave
Florida
early in the
next.
morning.
I'll be in Florida next week, but I'll call you when I get back and we'll figure something out. Because I'm planning on doing
You
the
going
same thing.
Are you going to ICAST?
No, we're going to visit Lori's parents.
Is ICAST next week? Isn't that what it is?
I think so.
Yeah, I think.
I don't know.
Roger's
Staley would know. He's a bass nerd. Is ICAST next week?
I think it is, but I don't know for sure. I've been seeing a bunch of stuff coming up.
No, it's coming soon.
Mhm.
All right, brother.
Yeah,
We
man.
appreciate it,
All right,
man.
man.
I'll holler at you when I get back from Florida.
That's right. You have a good one.
All right, brother.
Hey, thanks, Martin. Good luck the rest of the season.
Thank you, sir. You too.
Now, how do I lose him?
Just muted him. I can't hear you if you're talking. It says you're muted in both places. Unmute yourself.
Am I there?
Yeah,
We
I got
good?
you. Yeah.
Sorry. So what do you think?
He's very, very smart dude. Looks at things a lot differently than a lot of people do.
Yep. That's why he's so good.
Not just bass, but I mean, he smart guy.
Yeah. I've lived all over the country and I've met a bunch of different people, and he's a special person, man. There's no doubt about it. Do we want to go to the amphitheater or finish it up in the conference room? Let's go to the amphitheater.
I don't know. Wrap it up. I got to go count my drop shot weights.
All right. I don't really have anything. We'll do one when I get back or when we get back, right? You're going to Saginaw and I'm
Yep.
going to Wisconsin, and we'll do another one when we get back. I know I'm gonna try and get Brian Schmidt. I know there's a couple other guys that you want to get, but now that we actually know some people, we can do a couple of them. I like to get Rob on Nakatomi. He's Martin's counterpart from California. He's a good dude. He's he can't, you think I'm weird and I jump from like subject to subject, he'll go from like one to another to another to another, and then usually by the time that you're done with the conversation, it's like, what were we talking about 5 minutes ago?
Yeah, I had that problem a lot.
Yeah,
It's all
it's
good.
called ADD, I guess. We all got a lot going on. Well, that's all I got, man. I'm good if you are. Good luck to everybody. Be safe. Happy
Yep.
4th of July. We got 4th of July coming up. Happy birthday to America.
Yep. Good luck to everybody. Be safe out there. It's going to be a dangerous weekend on the water for sure.
All right.
Yo.